Okay, welcome to another Primate podcast on Ecoflix. Today I'm delighted to be welcoming my friend Adams Cassinga, who is the founder and CEO of Conserve Congo, a Congolese non-governmental organization that is working to protect wildlife in the Congo. So Adams, welcome to Ecoflix.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
We tried before when you were in Kinshasa and the internet wasn't up to it, but you're in the UK. Tell me what you're hoping to achieve coming to England.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here, and the reason why we're here is part of our networking mission. We're meeting different stakeholders, trying to form relationships and maintain partnerships, and that's the main reason why we're here.
So it's quite unusual to have you on English soil. Normally you're based in Kinshasa, but let's go back a little bit. I understand you spent your boyhood in Bukavu, which is a lovely city on the shores of Lake Kivu in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Tell me about your boyhood.
Great. Yeah. Well, growing up in Bukavu, it was a beautiful place. I spent my childhood there until roughly my mid-teens. I attended a local Catholic school called Alfajiri, one of the best, if not the best. At the time, 90% of all my teachers were European, mainly French and Belgian. And I got really one of the best educations that I could in this institution. But there was something weird. And we were restricted, or should I say even prohibited, from speaking our mother tongues. So on school premises, we were only allowed to speak in French. And each time one spoke in any other language which wasn't French, you got punished. But the punishment was a little bit weird because they'll make you wear a skull, which I would later discover that it was an ape's skull if you were a boy. And if you are a girl, they'll shave off your head.
Good grief.
Yeah,
I think that would be classed as child abuse today.
It is child abuse, and I'm not sure if that still happens to date. But if it still does, I would be highly disappointed. But everybody of my age or older than me knows that. And this kind of discouraged, it was like detaching the pupils from nature, because when you see that, you tend to resent wildlife. But for me, instead, it worked differently. I was inquisitive. I became very curious, and I wanted to know what that skull was when it was still alive. And this is where I will make all means, and irrespective of my parents being against me going on an excursion, I'll go to Luiro at age 12. And that is going to be the first place and my first time to see a chimpanzee. But this was in a cage. I didn't see it in its natural habitat. And that triggered more curiosity on my part because I wanted to find out some more as to what these magnificent animals are and how they behave. Unfortunately, I didn't get anybody who would mentor me or who would tell me more about wildlife. And as a result, we could only hear the misconceptions that our parents and the adults around us also had. And I remember the only time that we could see wildlife, it was in the market. But this time around, they were already dead, chopped up into pieces, ready to be served as dinner. And that is the image that most people of my age, whether educated or not, have of wildlife. There was also another incident which occurred much more often, and it was the tourists. There was a huge truck that would come to our city, maybe 3-4 times a week, and it would be full of tourists. Most of them were not African. And I used to inquire from the adults around myself as to who these people were. And I would get the same answer over and over again. These were the rich the most educated and the powerful, coming from abroad, and they go somewhere in the mountains to see some kind of a monkey. And I put it quote unquote, some kind of a monkey. Not many people at the time knew what a gorilla was. And I remember the first time I heard, or most people heard about gorilla is during, I think that was in 1990, early 90s, I cannot recall the year exactly, when our currency was going through a crisis, and there was a note which was 50,000 Zairians at the time, and it had pictures of gorillas. Maheshe, I think one of the most.
I have one of those banknotes in a book somewhere. Yeah, yes.
And and I can still tell you, you see the caricature that they did to that animal. So these magnificent animals, they were put on a note which has no value. And I remember at that time, if they called you a Maheshe, it means you were a useless human being, just like the note was.
Oh dear, that is sad. Because
Indeed.
by contrast, look, I've got a Rwandan banknote here, and
Yeah,
5,000 Rwandan
sure.
francs. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's
But it's
significant.
quite, yes.
Yeah. And they have a golden monkey on the
Oh, wow.
1,000.
That's so beautiful, isn't it? So they're trying to give in it some value as of
Yes,
now. And that's because
yes.
people are becoming more and more aware of our natural heritage and how we should give it some extra or added value. But in those days, so those were the norms. And I can tell you to date, there are so many people of my age or older than me who don't think Mahesha is a being, is a real being. And those people believe it was just a drawing, a caricature, which was drawn by an artist just to depict something despicable or something that was highly negative.
I met Mahesh on several occasions, and he was very, very real.
Yeah, it was
But
very real.
so if we're talking about the mid-90s, that was a very difficult time for what was formerly Zaire, just about to become the Democratic Republic of Congo. What was your experience of those times?
Yeah, in those times, I grew up under a very fierce dictatorship under President Mobutu Sese Seko, and violence, intimidation were on top of the agenda. And I still remember vividly that the army was like the second best after, excuse me, after the political family. So it's either you were affiliated to a political party, which was just a single political party at the time. In fact, we used to call it parti état, which means party state. So that party represented the state, or you were in the military. So if you went in these two aspects of life or career paths, you were considered to be a loser. And therefore, Mobutu had a system of recruiting his best soldiers at a very young age. And he was like a symbol of power, like a national symbol of strength and revolution, that we almost worshipped him. And this way, in every school, there was a branch, the youth branch. And this youth branch had a program, and this program was called Les Pionniers du Zaïre. And we even had a hymn, Nous les pionniers du Zaïre. The same way we had the national anthem, the pioneers, which is equivalent to pioneers. I would even liken it to the program of the cadet, maybe in the American Army. It was a very competitive program which challenged you both physically, mentally, and intellectually. And they selected a cohort, sometimes not exceeding 50. And this cohort, from day one of high school, they will grow and they're being mentored by different personalities, be it in the political arena or in the military, so that they can become model citizens. And by the end of the high school, they will either join the political branch or they will join the army branch. And I was lucky to be part of the selected young people who were selected in my cohort at the time. But unfortunately, I would never last to go to the academy as my parents, my family, and friends had wished for me, because the war broke out in 1996. And this war will eventually end the era of dictatorship of Mobutu Sese Seko after 32 years in power. Now, when this happened, it shattered all my dreams. And because there were so many movements of armed groups and they were trying to recruit young men and women, people who already had that kind of idea on how to take instructions, how to take orders. They were young, they were naive. Those were the people that were being sought after. And we fell in that category. And unfortunately, after 3 or 4 attempts of trying to recruit me in such militia, my family decided to send me away. And that's how, at a very young age, I'll find myself as a young asylum seeker in South Africa. And here, my father had sent me here trying to salvage my life, but I ended up jumping from the pot, a boiling pot, into the fire itself. Very soon, I found myself on the street, and I didn't have any home where to stay. I struggled to feed myself, and as every young man, you will try to dabble in small crime here and there. And by so doing, I also tried to survive, teaching myself how to speak English. And that's the reason why I'm communicating with you in English right now. But that was part of my worst part of me being a human being. Because as a refugee, I think the worst thing about being a refugee is you're just a number, just like a prisoner. And sometimes when you've been given a bag of rice and soup, people think that they have done already their part. They do not think of you as a human being who has got needs beyond what you put inside your mouth. And therefore, that kind of treatment can make you redundant, maybe a little bit rebellious and angry at the same time. So I really grew up with a lot of anger. And if you ask me why, I wouldn't know, probably the experiences that I went through. And I really resented human beings. I was a recluse. I was really angry. But fortunately, after my life on the street, I would find my way of getting to the library and starting to read books in English. And I would empower myself on how to write English, being self-taught. I would change my environment and I'll go to another little city. It's currently called Nelspruit. This is about 40 kilometers away from the Kruger National Park. And here I started writing like an activist. And I think my spirit of activism was activated at this moment. Instead of just being angry at people who did not do any wrong to me, I started venting that anger through writing, and I was writing to the local newspaper. I wrote for about a year or more until someday I received a reply. And this reply was to invite me over to the newsroom. And I went there, I met up with this very vibrant lady. And she asked me, "Are you the person who writes these letters?" I said, "Yes." But she said, "It doesn't look like you," because I was really young and innocent. Under other skies, I was supposed to be innocent and in school, maybe. But what I wrote about was something that came from the bottom of my darkest part. And she wanted to find out why I was writing about such things. But this time, she didn't want me to tell her. She wanted me to put it into words. And she gave me a laptop, and that was the first time I've ever touched a laptop in my life. And with my two indexes, I started typing. It took me longer than necessary, but eventually I got the story together. And I can remember vividly her reading it. And after finishing, she looked at me and she said, "Wow, I am impressed," because English was my third language. But she was impressed with the way I put words together. And she told me, "When do you start?" I can still remember that sentence resonating in my mind as if it was yesterday. And I can tell you, Yan, that sentence was what saved me from the worst. If she did not tell me that word, definitely today I'd be either in prison or I'd be dead. And that goes to show you how human beings can play a godly role to other human beings. And when you look at the problems we have today in our society, even in conservation, it's because people no longer play that role. Instead, they play the devilish kind of role in other people's lives. So this lady gave me a chance and she said I could volunteer or be an intern at this newspaper. And they were ready to pay for my school fees. So I really scored two goals at the same time. And this way I started working there, and very quickly I saw myself growing up and growing at the same time with the newspapers. And before you knew it, I had a whole publication under my sleeve as an editor. And in the meantime, I was doing investigative journalism, mainly focusing on environmental crimes, because this little town wasn't just agricultural, it was also a mining town. And therefore, there were so many crimes or infractions being committed uh, regarding the environment. Mainly, we had a crisis of poaching in the park. We also had lots of illegal mining. A lot of crime happened within that area because sometimes within various gangs of illegal miners, there would be a clash and they would kill each other. I remember at one point I went to cover a story about 18 miners who went illegally into an old gold mine shaft, and 17 of them died. And the guy who survived was reluctant to tell even the authorities that his friends were still stuck down there. And it's only after a month that he said that. And I was part of the media crew that went down there to investigate as to what really happened. With sparing you the details on that, those are some of the stories which are covered. Unfortunately, at around 2005, 2006, something terrible happened. I was covering a story on a young boy who was killed in a ritualistic way in what they used to call an initiation school. So basically, an initiation school is a rite of passage in certain tribes in Africa. When a boy reaches a certain age, they'll go through a certain kind of a school. It takes a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And it's a group of boys where they usually do circumcision and they teach them how to become men. I don't know if a man can be taught how to be a man. I always thought a man was born a man, but that's a cultural aspect to certain African tribes. But there is a dark side to this because sometimes people who do not understand culture very well, sometimes they caricature culture into making these boys believe that they have to make a sacrifice, a human sacrifice for them to be stronger. And usually they would pick on the weak ones or the younger ones. And therefore, this boy was murdered and buried by his colleagues under the auspices of the leaders of the school. And they kept it a secret. So the grandmother came to the newsroom and she wanted to know what happened to her grandson. And that's how myself and my photographer would go into the field trying to investigate the story. We had already done a very good job on the story, but it just remained to get the comments of the owner of this initiation school. And it's when I went to confront the man that the man pulled out a gun on me and he shot me. So in the process, I got shot 3 times. He fired 5 times, but I got hit 3 times, 2 in my body and 1 in my leg. And I was just lucky because of 2 reasons. The doctor would say that my blood clots easily. And that's what saved me from bleeding to death. But also the gun that he had was a 22 caliber revolver. So it happens to be one of the lower caliber. For you to cause a lot of damage to a human being, you need to be at very close proximity or close range. But I guess there was about 5 or 6 meters between me and the shooter. And that's the reason why I can still speak to you today. And that marked the end of my career as an active reporter because I was just so scared. And family and friends advised me to calm down a little bit and seek a different career path.
So was that the point you went to the United States?
Yes. So I took up a short course. And after taking up a short course, it allowed me to venture into mining. And I got a job in Ghana. And as I got a job in Ghana, I started making now money. You can imagine as a junior in the mining sector, I made 4 times the salary which I made as a senior reporter. And at this stage, I could visit the whole world. I could go anywhere I wanted, and I chose to go and settle in the United States. And this way, I benefited from the State Department benefited a scholarship. And I started staying there. So I was back and forth at work in Africa and back to the US. And mining really opened up a broader horizon to my life. And the biggest thing that the mining sector brought to me was to embrace diversity. The first time I saw so many people coming from all over the world was in the mining sector. And I managed to benefit that experience, which makes me the global citizen that I am today. I also made a little bit of money because there is so much money in the mining sector. And I quickly climbed the ladder, the corporate ladder. I started off in Ghana. Very soon I moved to Burkina Faso. I worked in Mali. And eventually I was sent to Tanzania. And by the time I reached Tanzania, I was already a Bwana. I was no longer wearing coveralls and pushing wheelbarrows. I was already in a suit and a tie. And this job allowed me to taste the best of life. As a young African, we always dream of being financially stable, taking our younger ones into school, building our mothers a little house. And that's what I did, just like any young man. And eventually in 2010, a very big opportunity came because the firm that I was working with got a contract to go to the DRC. And it happened that I was the right man for the job. When they asked me, I did not think twice. I said, yes, I'm going to take up the employment. And that's going to be the first time I'd return to the DRC as an adult. And I remember vividly sitting at Entebbe International Airport in a private jet. You can imagine coming from the gutter, and suddenly I'm now flying in a private jet, just myself with a couple of colleagues and a pilot. And we flew over the forests, the Congo Basin forests. Honestly, I had never seen anything as pristine, as beautiful as what I saw. The canopy, the way it was just so green, it looked like a green carpet. And it's being crisscrossed by these big rivers and little rivulets. It looked so surreal. And I was just taking pictures. And I was very well traveled. And this goes to show you that I had been everywhere else, but I had never been to myself. And what I could say, I didn't know we even had this beautiful of a country, because at the time when I was growing up, it was much more expensive to fly from one city to the other than flying internationally from one country to the other. And I think even to date, it seems more or less the same. Because at the time, flying from my hometown into Kinshasa, the capital city, it costs about $800. At the same time, flying from Kinshasa, a return ticket to England was about $700.
Crazy.
So you can see that we didn't know each other as Congolese. We didn't even know our country. And the situation has not changed a bit today.
Wasn't Mobutu reported to have said he didn't want to build roads because his enemies could get to him if there was a road network around the country?
It is true. It is true. Unfortunately, as powerful as he thought he was, there were so many stupid statements which he made, and today we still laugh it off.
The sight of this pristine nature, and then you're going to a mine. How did that affect you?
It affected me a lot because now I found myself on site with my body and my mind, but my heart remained in that forest. And I think to date, my heart is still in that forest. And that's the reason why I put my mouth where my heart is. And I said I'm going to be a mouthpiece to speak up, not only for that forest, but for all the beings that live in it. And that's what I've been doing for the past 11 years. It wasn't an easy journey, venturing into a sector that I knew very little about. I knew almost nothing about it. And remember, I had a 5-year contract to work on this mine, but I ended up only doing 2 years. And the day I left, most of my colleagues thought it was an April's Fool story. They didn't believe that for a young African making the kind of money that I was making, being as influential as I was just going to give up and move. But surprisingly, I did. But it's not a decision that just fell from the skies. As soon as I arrived on site, I started thinking about exiting. It's just that I didn't tell nobody. But also, I was thinking, how do I exit? So it took 2 years for me to gather enough courage to say I quit. And immediately I quit. The first thing I did was to go home with my family, my brothers, my sisters, my parents. I told them that I quit. All of them thought I was crazy. And to date, there are some family members who do not talk to me because of that decision I made. Because they all asked me, so what you gonna do now? And I said, I want to be in conservation. I want to preserve the forest and all the beings that live in it. Everybody thought that I wasn't the right person to do that and that I had left my real calling, which was to take care of the family because I was the sole breadwinner at the time.
Wow, what an amazing life Adams Cassinga has led. Far too much for a single podcast. This is the end of part 1. Come back for part 2.